تستمع الجمعية العامة الآن إلى كلمة معالي السيد قاهر.
The Assembly will hear an address by Mr. Kохир Расулзоda, Prime Minister of the Republic of Tajikistan. May I request protocol to escort His Excellency.
يسرني برحب بصاحب المعالي.
I have great pleasure in welcoming His Excellency Kохir Rasulzoda, Prime Minister of the Republic of Tajikistan, and invite him to address the General Assembly.
Distinguished Mr. President, distinguished Secretary General, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me a great pleasure to join the heartfelt congratulations extended to Professor Tijani Mohammed Band on his election to the very important position of the President of the 74th session of the United Nations General Assembly. I would also like to express my appreciation to Madam Maria Fernanda Espinosa Garces for her excellent work as the President of the 73rd session of the UN General Assembly. Mr. President, for almost 75 years, the United Nations has been a universal venue for discussing and resolving current urgent issues. However, the world we live in is changing rapidly. The instability in modern world, in the context of growing geopolitical and geoeconomic competition, as well as an increasing number of global threats and challenges, demand that we act in an effective and consistent manner. We consider it essential to make more effective use of the tools the organization has at its disposal and to enhance our joint efforts. There's also a need to strengthen the commitment to maintaining a rules-based order with an efficiently functioning United Nations at its center. In this regard, Tajikistan supports the efforts of the UN Secretary General with regard to the organization's comprehensive reform aimed at strengthening and enhancing its capacity to meet today's challenges and threats in a timely and efficient manner. Mr. President, terrorism and extremism, alongside transnational organized crime and illicit drug trafficking, undermine international peace and security, aggravate conflicts and destabilize entire regions. They undermine our efforts to advance and protect human rights and promote sustainable development. Today, Tajikistan is doing everything in its capacity to combat terrorism and extremism, transnational organized crime, and illicit drug trafficking. Now, in light of the experience gained over many years by our country in peace building and prevention and countering terrorism, as well as combating illicit drug trafficking, we hosted a high-level conference, International and Regional Cooperation on Countering Terrorism and its Financing through Illicit Drug Trafficking and Organized Crime. That conference was held in Dushanbe on May 16 and 17th of this year. The Dushanbe conference was the first in a series of regional initiatives within the framework of the follow-up process to the high-level conference of heads of counter-terrorism agencies of UN member states, which was convened by the UN Secretary General in June of 2018 in New York. We are confident that the Dushanbe conference will serve as an important platform for comprehensive dialogue and exchanging of good practices and experience among all interested parties. The issues of combating terrorism and extremism were also on the agenda of the fifth summit conference on interaction and confidence building measures in Asia, held in Dushanbe on June 15th of 2019. As the current chair of this body, Tajikistan considers further efforts of countries to promote peace and stability and security in Asia as extremely important. Efforts should be focused on dismantling the military infrastructure of international terrorism, cutting it off from any political, military, or financial support, preventing the use of internet for radicalization, recruitment, and propaganda of extremism and violence. Illicit drug trafficking is one of the primary sources of financing of terrorism. Now, being on the front lines of combating this evil. Our country, since its independence, has done a lot to address this issue. In 1999, the Drug Control Agency, which is the National Drug Enforcement Agency under the President of the Republic of Tajikistan, was established with the support of the United Nations. In 2013, Tajikistan adopted the National Counter-Narcotics Strategy up to the period 2020. We consider the proposal of President of Tajikistan, His Excellency Emoli Ramon, to be extremely timely. He proposed establishing, with the support of the UN, a special group that will include representatives of law enforcement agencies from countries of the so-called Northern Route, and will involve experts to research the issue of illicit drug trafficking. Our hope is that UN member states will support this initiative. Security and stability in the Central Asian region are, of course, closely interlinked with developments in Afghanistan. As a country that has the longest border with Afghanistan, Tajikistan, since the first days of its independence, has constantly made efforts to promote lasting peace and stability in this friendly country. We are also making a practical contribution to the social and economic development of this neighboring state, connecting the transport corridors of our two countries, and by creating an energy bridge called Casa 1000, and providing the Afghan population with electricity and essential commodities, as well as by training their experts. One of the most important areas in this regard was the involvement of Afghanistan in the process of multilateral regional cooperation and the creation of favorable conditions for the use of the transit potential of the country and the region. Tajikistan fully supports the efforts of the Afghan authorities to establish a process of peace negotiations. Mr. President, the year 2019 is a very important year for taking stock of the results of the implementation of the 2030 Agenda on Sustainable Development. The 4-year cycle of the High-Level Political Forum on Sustainable Development has been successfully completed. We have a good opportunity to step up efforts towards the implementation of the 2030 Agenda during its remaining 11 years. Because despite considerable efforts, the current pace of progress towards the SDGs is insufficient. In this regard, we support the call of the UN Secretary General on the need to act urgently and with purpose in order to implement the 2030 Agenda in a timely fashion. We have adopted a national development strategy for the period up to 2030 and a medium-term development program for the period 2016-2020, which are fully consistent with the 2030 Agenda and are key tools for taking national ownership of the SDGs, in our country. At the same time, there is a whole array of new problems and challenges. Among them, first and foremost, as we consider climate change, which seriously affects the process of implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals and targets. Over the past 60 years, the average annual air temperature in Tajikistan has increased by 1 degree Celsius per year. The number of days with heavy precipitation has increased, as well as the frequency and intensity of natural hydrometeorological events. Water-related natural disasters alone cause damage worth hundreds of millions of US dollars to our economy every year. Often natural disasters claim human lives. The negative impact of climate change on the quantity and quality of freshwater resources is also becoming more and more evident. Over the past few decades, Tajikistan has witnessed a significant decrease in the surface area of our glaciers, which are of vital importance for the entire Central Asian region. In this context, we consider it necessary to strengthen cooperation among countries to address the consequences of natural disasters by developing preventive measures and establishing funds for providing assistance to countries in need. It is also essential to enhance the monitoring of glaciers, snow, and other water resources, and to take effective measures to protect them for future generations. We consider it necessary to comprehensively promote the development a green economy, in particular the development of green energy as an essential component of sustainable development. The widespread use of renewable energy, mainly hydroelectricity, contributes to the economic and social development of our country while keeping our harmful emissions into the atmosphere at a minimum. Hydroelectric power plants, which generate about 98% of our electricity, form the basis of our country's energy sector. The government has been taking comprehensive measures to balance energy production and energy consumption by upgrading existing hydroelectric stations and increasing their production capacity, by constructing new hydroelectric power plants, and also by introducing modern methods of energy saving. Mr. President, Tajikistan is one of the leaders in bringing water issues to the forefront of the global agenda. It is widely known that over the past few decades, at the initiative of His Excellency the President of Tajikistan, Emomali Rahmon, 4 important global initiatives have been approved by the UN General Assembly. In the course of their promotion and implementation, these initiatives received broad support from UN member states and international and regional organizations, financial institutions, prominent members of the science and business communities, as well as representatives of civil society. In 2018, the implementation of our 4th global initiative, the International Decade of Action, Water for Sustainable Development 2018-2028, was successfully launched. The UN General Assembly resolution adopted on this issue regulates the modalities of the midterm comprehensive review of the implementation of this decade and envisages 2 important global events. For the first time in more than 40 years, since the first UN conference on water in Mar del Plata, Argentina, there will be a UN conference on the midterm comprehensive review of the implementation of the International Decade of Action, Water for Sustainable Development 2018-2028. It will take place in March of 2023 in New York. In 2021, a one-day high-level meeting of the UN General Assembly will be held to promote the implementation of water-related goals and targets of the 2030 Agenda. In this connection, the Republic of Tajikistan, as part of the Dushanbe process, will hold a second conference on the implementation of the International Decade of Action titled Galvanizing Water-Related Action and Partnerships on local, national, regional, and global levels. It will be held in June of 2020 in Dushanbe. We sincerely hope that UN member states will once again support us and will take an active part in our forthcoming conference in Dushanbe. We are convinced that the development of water cooperation and partnerships will contribute to a timely adoption of much-needed measures on achieving the SDGs. Mr. President, in conclusion, I would like to note that today, against the backdrop of emerging new problems on a global scale, we have to make enormous efforts in order to achieve the goals we set before us in a timely fashion. The most urgent among these is the threat of global terrorism, of climate change, the deterioration of the environment, the acute shortage of resources, the growing gap between poor and rich countries and population groups. The UN remains the only universal organization capable of coordinating and uniting efforts of the entire international community to resolve the most urgent problems faced by mankind. Thank you very much for your attention.
باسم الجمعية العامة أود أن أشكر معالي السيد
On behalf of the General Assembly, I wish to thank Mr. Kохир Расулзода, Prime Minister of the Republic of Tajikistan, for the statement just made, and I request protocol to escort His Excellency.